Hello. So I'm walking along with my new gimbal. It's a Zoom Smooth 4, and bit of a learning curve for me to figure out how it's all working, but I think I'm going to like it a lot. Please enjoy my stories or whatever else might be on my mind today. I've been working on my chain link gate here, and in doing so, I've been thinking about security. You see, I have barbed wire up there at the top, and it's padlocked, and it's all chain linked and pretty much done right. And I was working with the chain link. That's this down here. And I wanted to show you something. Watch this. I take this and I cut it once here, and I cut it once here, and I make a little crank out of this part. And you can screw that right out. Look at that. That fast. I've got an opening this big. And the point is that all of that chain link and chain link fence is just pretty easily defeated. You know, I don't know if it's real world. I haven't been to a lot of prisons, but in the movies you always see all these chain link fences around the prison yard. Man, it took me, what, 10 seconds to get a hole in that chain link big enough to go through. 10 seconds. And I want to make a point about that. Well, I thought I'd do this video from a different place today, so I'm coming up here to my bedroom, and maybe you'd like to see the view out my bedroom window. And I'm going to sit right over there in that chair and talk to you today about security in Mexico. So, security in Mexico, or security anywhere. A lot of what I want to say today has to do with security in general. But let's talk about Mexico for a minute. Those of us who are retired in Mexico and live here mostly full-time are asked quite often, do we feel safe living in Mexico? And the answer is yes, we absolutely do feel safe living in Mexico. I think we should focus upon the important word in that sentence. Yes, I feel safe living in Mexico. It's not about safe. It's not about security. It's about how you feel. We feel safe here. We feel safe here because we don't experience that media news that reports the nature of news. And the nature of news is that it doesn't report that we had a nice, pleasant, wonderful day here. There wasn't any cartel shootout. We weren't burglarized. We weren't murdered. We weren't threatened. It is the nature of news not to report the norm, but the abnormal. News reports the unusual. News reports the thing that never happens because it happened today. And if you form your opinion about whether a place, whether it's Mexico or any place else in the world, upon the news reports, you may very well form a wrong impression. Now let's discount the Middle East and all of that mess and war. That's a different thing. I'm talking about normal, comfortable society. So, do I feel comfortable living in Mexico? Yes, I absolutely feel comfortable living in Mexico because my experience in 16 years of living in Mexico is that, yes, I've read in the paper that there have been beheadings and hangings and murders and cartel shootouts where people have been killed. I have read that there are burglaries and kidnappings, but it hasn't happened to me in 16 years. And I don't think that's just because I'm lucky. I think it's because I'm normal. That's the point. In 16 years, there was one incident of a personal, a person that I know personally that was injured here in an act of violence, criminal violence. Friend was working on his computer in his very large house, and he heard a knock at the front door, and he went to the front door, and nobody was there. And by the time he got back to the room where his computer was, which also had an external door, he was met by a young man with a pistol. And the young man marched him through the house, and my friend kind of tripped on a rug in the kitchen and turned to catch himself, and the guy shot him through his hand. That happened not too far from where I live, at a friend's house. The horror of that story didn't stop there, and this may give you pause. He went to the Red Cross, which is one of the places that you can go for emergency treatment here, Cruz Rojo. And they couldn't treat him because it was a criminal act, and they couldn't address his wound until the police investigators got there to assess his wound. So it was several hours before the doctors at the Red Cross could treat him. That may be different than where you live, and it may give you pause. Does it bother me that this happened? It bothers me that it happened to my friend. And of course, it was something we all talked about at the time. But it's not something that we dwell upon every day in our normal day-to-day existence. It happened many years ago. My personal take on security is that it's in your mind, and that's why I concentrate on the word how do you feel, not is there security, or is there safety, or is it safe, or is it dangerous? It's not about the barbed wire on the top of my chain link fence, and it's not about security doors, and it's not about razor wire. Less than a block from here, the guy's all surrounded by razor wire, which you can cut with a pair of pliers. I've got at least 4 tools in my workshop that'll cut a padlock like that. Security is a mental thing. It's a mental state. If you feel like you're safe, then that's what you want to go for. Trying to secure yourself physically in the outside world is just something that makes you feel better. It's not something that actually changes the real world. Let me give you some examples. A friend of mine was going to rent his house, so he had a room that he wanted to secure in order to put his personal stuff while the house was rented. And there was an open arched doorway that he wanted to close off because it wasn't right in the right place that he wanted. So he was going to build another doorway over here in the cement reinforced concrete wall with bricks in the middle and plaster and whatever. And then he was going to put a big metal door there with a big, secure lock on it so he could lock up his stuff. And I was there the day that the workers came to make the hole in the wall before they closed off the old open door in order to just make the new metal doorway. And it took them about 5 minutes to get through the wall. So I'm thinking, okay, you're going to put in this big heavy metal door with a big secure lock on it, and it takes 5 minutes to get through the wall over here in a hole big enough to crawl through. So what have you done? You've slowed somebody down 5 minutes. That's what you've done. I'll give you another example. I used to live in a 7,000 square foot mini mansion in Portland, Oregon, and I didn't have anything in the house of my personal possessions that I felt couldn't be replaced, but I felt a responsibility to this house. It was built in 1919, and it was a historically registered property. And my wife and I were fortunate enough at the time, before our kids were in school, to spend 3 or 4 days a week, overnight, on our boat. So we're gone, and sometimes, a lot of times. And like I said, I felt a responsibility to protect this property that was built in 1919 before I was born, and was going to certainly last a lot longer than I was going to be around. And it had big, oak pocket doors and rosewood paneling and original gaslight fixtures and things that a vandal could do thousands of dollars worth of damage to, and certainly would be covered by insurance. But I, again, felt a responsibility to the property to protect it. So I called up the Portland police and said the burglar division, robbery division, whatever, that they would at the time do a security evaluation of your house. And the concept was that if you could slow a robber down by 1 or 2 or 3 minutes, that he would probably go to another place that was easier to access instead of your house. So they came out and they said, yes, you should put 13 gauge steel mesh over your basement windows, huge basement windows all the way around the foundation. The foundation was 6 foot tall. The windows were 4 foot wide, 5 foot tall. Anyway, yeah. So I did that with the steel mesh over the basement windows. Turned out that was a code violation recommended by the police. That's another story, the police recommending that I do a code violation because it was egress to a sleeping quarter. Anyway, another one of their recommendations was that the whole back of the house was a lot of glass, a big expanse of glass with big, huge glass wall that looked out over a deck and into the woods. And it was in the back of the house, away from the street, where you couldn't see it from the street. And they said you should cover that with Lexan polycarbonate, which is bulletproof glazing, which I did at some expense. And I used to love to go back there and show people what I had done, and I would go and I'd go kaboom against the Lexan polycarbonate and make a big noise and say, wow, look how strong and secure that is. And then I had a friend come over one day, and this friend, well, he had some street smarts about skills that we're not going to talk about. Anyway, I made my big demonstration to him, and he said, right there by the deadbolt on the door, it would take my little propane torch about 15 seconds to get through that bulletproof glazing. Burst my bubble. Did I feel less secure? Well, yeah. But I also realized that the security I had felt was in my mind. My neighbor, when I first moved in here, he had an open driveway and he built a rather ornate gate. And the day it was finished, he called me over and said, look at my wonderful gate I built. And I asked him, do you feel safer now that your gate goes across the driveway? And he said, well, of course. And I said, I think you built a ladder. And I climbed up one side and down the other into his driveway and burst his bubble. And I felt bad for him because this security thing in his life, I had taken the wind out of that sail. But again, my point is that security is in your mind. Um, I have a safe. It's one of those kind of safes that you find in a hotel room, or and you put your own combination into it, and then you lock the door. A friend of mine saw my safe and he said, "You know, you can open that with a potato." I didn't believe him, but I went on the internet and I looked at it, and it's actually true. There's an electronic plunger, and if you hit it in the safe door in just the right place, the plunger will jump and you can open it. So, if you're a burglar, if that's your profession, you're probably going to know these things. That a hotel safe can be opened with a potato. And if you lock your stuff up with a padlock, that security is going to keep out the honest people. It's not going to keep out the burglar, because padlocks are easy. There are some padlocks, and by the way, I own 1,000 antique padlocks. Another story. You can hit a lot of padlocks with a hammer, and the plunger in there will jump and they'll come open if you hit them just in the right place. Anyway, security is something that you have to learn to have in your mind. And why am I talking about security when I told you I was going to talk about, is it safe to live in Mexico? Because we feel safe in Mexico, and we feel safe in Mexico because we're experiencing the day-to-day norm, not what the media presents as the unusual, the abnormal, and the thing that is only news because it doesn't happen very much. So yes, I feel comfortable living in Mexico. Now, in spite of that, we do take some precautions. I brought a visual aid with me today, and it's a flashlight. It's also a strobe light, and it's a stun gun. I was doing this out the window one night to scare the neighborhood dog that was barking, and I touched the screen and it transferred the electricity to the body of the flashlight, and I jerked like that, and it was over here at this window, and it hit the wall here and broke. This is a different flashlight. My arm did not work the same for about a week. I'm pretty sure that will put you down. Why do I have that? Well, I have it because it's a novelty, and I have it because it's scary. But my real attitude towards it is that I hope it's like the fire extinguisher in my house. I hope it's always the most worthless thing I own. Useless thing. So to conclude about, is it safe to live in Mexico? It's not about where you live. That's my point. It's not about Chicago or Los Angeles or Houston or Guadalajara or Ajijic. It's not about chain link fence and razor wire. It's not about the incidence of crime. It's not about a rich society and a poor society and the fact that this creates a dichotomy in the economy so that some people need to rob from some other people. It's not about those things. Those things are the things that make news because they're unusual when abnormalities happen. Do I feel safe living here? Absolutely. Don't let the news make up your mind about what you think about security. I'm sure that I didn't convince anyone that's dead set on the idea that it's dangerous to live in Mexico. I talked to a person who was doing some electrical work for me, a lady actually, in Gresham, Oregon, in a rental house that I used to own. And I said, I have a home in Mexico. And she said, oh, I wouldn't go to Mexico. No, 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 no. My brother was mugged and robbed down there. I said, really? Well, where did that happen? She said, oh, it was outside of a bar in Tijuana. I'm not going to form my analysis of the security risk in Mexico based upon what happened outside of a bar in Tijuana. That's not part of my experience. My experience is that normal day-to-day life here is not very newsworthy because it's just pleasant. Thanks for watching.
Hey, if you like me, give me one of those thumbs up. And please subscribe and hit that little bell so you know when I post next. Please share me with your friends on social media. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed what was on my mind today.